And it's not about clarity of thought. It's about clarity of messaging. It's not about how clear you are in your head. What matters most is how clear you are in the ears of the listener. Maybe it's just the realization that the only thing worse than not getting business or getting results is not knowing why. Fear sits at the center of pretty much of every problem and therefore stands tall at the center of every solution.
Referrals don't simply flow from people who know, like, and trust us. What tends to drive referrals in the real world?
Credibility keeps you in the room. Clarity keeps the conversation flowing. And connectivity expands the relationship. So I can't risk my reputation and give back, even though the intention.
Muhami Matters with Chris Adams, powered by CJA Consulting.
Hello, welcome to Muhami Matters, where credibility meets clarity in legal and professional services. As always, I'm your host, Chris Adams, founder of Muhami and CJA Consulting. Today's conversation is about something every professional needs, but few are ever formally taught: how to win confidence in business. My guest is Dr. Oudi Abouchacra, speaker, author, and creator of the 4Cs framework, a model built around competence, credibility, clarity, connectivity. Count them out there. In a market where professionals are often told to focus on being known, liked, and trusted, Dr. Oudi takes a more rigorous view. He challenges familiar business development ideas and offers a framework designed to help people become more referable, more effective communicators, and more valuable in the eyes of clients, peers, and partners. So for lawyers, consultants, or founders navigating growth, this is a conversation about what actually moves relationships forward, especially in times like now, which might be a little uncertain. It also helps when you're trying to stay visible and continuing to invest in relationships, and that can make all the difference in difficult times. So without any further ado, Dr. Oudi, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Great to be here, Chris. I'm looking forward to this.
For those who are meeting you for the first time, please do introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and your business.
Yeah. So I basically do three things at the moment. I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and a writer, in that order. And coaching and writing are distant seconds and thirds. So yeah, what I love more than anything in the world is educating through teaching and communicating to groups mostly. So I run a performance coaching and training company called Inspired Results, based out of Abu Dhabi, but obviously connecting with people all around the world.
Right, you're originally from Lebanon, so not too far from our home of the UAE. How long have you been living in the UAE for?
I've been here going on, almost 21 years now.
As an Australian, I'm always very envious of people who are from the region and can just hop home for a weekend if they need to. So, I'm very envious.
Yeah, I know you're a long ways, right? Being an Aussie.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, but it's hard to get back there.
What, 16 plus hours sometimes, right?
Yeah, about that 14 hours to the East Coast, so direct. But that's okay. Anyway, back down to business. So your work spans speaking, coaching, and writing. How did that journey evolve from being a chiropractor, which you originally were, into performance communication and business growth?
Yeah, see, most people think I kind of walked away from chiropractic to do something new, when in fact I returned to what I was doing long before I was a chiropractor. So when I entered chiropractic school in my first few months, I mean, just imagine, I grew up in Toronto, and I packed my U-Haul and it towed my car basically to Dallas, a 24-hour drive, to study chiropractic. In my first few months, I realized that I was probably going to fail. Because when it came to muscles, it was very challenging. I had to learn a lot of muscles in a short period of time. And I just thought, man, I imagined myself, driving that U-Haul back to Toronto, and I said, this can't happen. So I doubled down. I came up with some mnemonics just to help me really pass. And to my great surprise, I got an A in anatomy. And then, so people started saying, hey, go talk to Oudi, he got an A. And so I started tutoring people and eventually spoke to classes that were, months behind me. And yeah, I wrote a book called Anatomy Made Simple. That was my first book, and I was selling books. And then I even heard through the grapevine that one of the gross anatomy professors would start his lecture with, I want to let you know from day one that if you buy Dr. Oudi's book, I was a 24-year-old student still, wasn't even a doctor yet. If you buy Dr. Oudi's book, it's cheating because people are getting A's left, right, and center. And one last thing, yeah, and one last point is that there was this transformational moment where this single mother came up to me. She was probably in her 50s, and she said to me, Oudi, because of your class and because of your book, I'm going to graduate as a doctor. And I just want to thank you so much because this was the toughest course. And yeah, I'm a single mom, and, I just can't tell you how much this means to me. So right there, that's when that feedback is what kept me going. And I constantly was tutoring and coaching. And even when I graduated as a chiropractor, what I look forward to the most was not actually moving bones around. It was actually coaching people on their lifestyle and doing talks on, how to get their lifestyle working for them instead of against them. So I kind of went back to that, if you will, to speaking and coaching and writing.
Yeah, so I guess a different angle on health and wellness, because you're talking about, I guess, also almost mental health and health, mental wellness. And you've evolved those health, the wellness, the fear, and now you're into the 4 Cs. So is that what brought you to this current 4 Cs framework?
Yeah, so you're right. Just to give your audience understanding, I did start educating on, I was teaching about muscles, tutoring students, and I started teaching about in my clinic about posture and diet and exercise and sleep and what I call the pillars of health. And then it went into mental health because I noticed that most health problems actually come from mental emotional struggles. And then that led to my fear forward concept where I help people overcome fears because I believe fear sits at the center pretty much of every problem. And therefore, stands tall at the center of every solution. So I do a lot of fear related coaching. Now I'm, being in a networker for many, many years and running many businesses, being an entrepreneur, etc. I found that a lot of my patients were coming in and their physical health struggles were coming from mental issues that related to business. So that's when I started, and I struggled with myself too, like with the fear of public speaking back in chiropractic college, right? So I started helping people with more of a professional development framework.
Brilliant. And what problems were you seeing repeatedly that kind of made you think like this?
Well, it depends on the vertical, but if you're talking about entrepreneurs struggle with getting an ROI on their activities, right? If you're talking about networkers, it was about maximizing their networking ROI, right? If you're talking about corporate professionals, government employees, etc., their struggles were public speaking or leadership or engagement and retention, those kinds of things.
Okay, so different for everybody. Was there sort of I guess a continuous theme across all of them, or is it really quite
Yes.
diverse?
There is a theme, and the theme is business relationship mastery, because that's what it
Okay.
comes down to. It all comes down to relationships in the end. Even when I was coaching patients on like emotional stuff, I always say that nothing stresses people more than other people. It comes down to relationships in the end. And yeah, so that was pretty much the main thing, in that most business professionals were struggling with their business relationships. Like, why am I not closing deals? Like, what did I say? What did I do? What is it about me? What is it about this connection that I have? Right? Why are my networking efforts not paying dividends? Why are people not referring to me and wanting to rub shoulders with me and that kind of thing? I
So I
struggled with
believe
that
this.
personally, so I totally could relate to people for many, many years.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people do struggle, especially I think if you've gone from being in, say, a professional industry or like an employee to starting your own business. That's where you do start to all of a sudden really need those business relationships more than anything else. I think that's where a lot of people do struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, when you're in the corporate world, you go to work, right? And you just connect with the people in that circle. And that's pretty much it. Networking is really about just socializing. They don't really need to network. They don't really need to expand their influence and their reach because they just go to work and it's taken care of, right? The company's taken care of. But the problem is when many of these individuals then shift into the world of entrepreneurship, that's when networking, business related networking becomes so vitally important for their businesses.
Now, a mantra that's often associated with business networking is know, like, and trust. But from our conversation before this, I was surprised, I guess, or I hadn't heard anyone say before that they felt that it was a bit incomplete. But you do feel like the know, like, and trust model is a bit incomplete. Tell us a bit more about that.
Right. The most obvious thing, if you look at these three words, right? People need to know you, they need to like you, and they need to trust you before they're going to do business with you, right? So we all know that communication is vitally important in business, right? And yet in the know, like, trust model, there is no mention of the importance of communication. If that has to somehow be assumed or implied, right, by know, like, and trust, it's just too difficult. It's too vague of a concept to really sink your teeth into. So that's one kind of way that the know, like, trust model doesn't go far enough. Another way is, if you think about it, if the number one reason why people chose to do business with you is because they know you, like you, and trust you, and it's, like I said, partly true. But if this was everything, then you would expect your greatest number of referrals should come from your innermost circle, right? Your family and
True.
friends, because after all, they know, like, and trust you the most. And while in the inception period of a business, you may get, you know, friends and family showing up at your coffee shop to get you off the ground, maybe even invest in you. In the lifetime of a business, you're not going to get the majority of your business from people who know, like, and trust you. In fact, and there's many different ways I can approach this, but in fact, sometimes you may choose to do business, and while this may be the exception, you may choose to do business with someone you don't know, don't like necessarily, and don't trust yet. Doing business with someone that's too close to home. You don't want maybe your financial advisor to be your uncle or your gynecologist to be your aunt, right?
So are you saying that wouldn't you would do business with someone you didn't know or you didn't like or you didn't trust?
I am saying that. I'll
Like
give you
an
an example.
incomplete relationship? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to throw a random example I use often, and I have nothing against this guy. Okay, I think he's actually quite interesting. Gordon Ramsay, right, from Hell's Kitchen, right? Okay, I don't know him. I know of him. I may like him, you may not, but I don't know enough really about him to even have, affinity towards him. And then what does trust even mean? Like, what are we talking about? It's so vague. But I'll tell you that even though I don't trust how he's going to treat my son if he went to culinary school, I don't know how he'd be with him on a human level, right? But guess what? I would choose to send someone that I care about dearly, like a son, like a relative, to Gordon Ramsay because I know they're going to come out getting some results. I don't know the guy. I don't necessarily like the guy, maybe, and I don't have enough to trust him. And yet, I'll still choose to do business with this individual, pay big bucks to go be a student.
Okay. So you said the know, like, and trust model is a bit incomplete. I believe what you put forward as an addition or as an alternative is the 4 Cs. Tell us a bit about the 4 Cs at a higher level and why you believe they offer a stronger framework for winning confidence in business.
Sure. So basically, the 4 Cs are competence. In other words, people want to know that you can deliver results as a professional. That's trusting on a professional level. Okay. And the second C is credibility, right? This is saying, hey, I can trust you on a human level, on a personal level, and I separate them for a reason. And we can dive deeper if if you'd like to know why. So one is trusting you professionally or as a professional. The other one's trusting you personally as a human, right? But even with those two, you can see that it's not enough, right? Because you can believe someone's exceptional as a dentist, let's say, and you trust them as a human being, but then they lack clarity of communication. You don't really understand what the problem is. So what are you saying? I need to get veneers. I need to get braces. What's really going on? I don't understand, right? And the networking space is vitally important because if you can't communicate what you do with precision, it's difficult for people to understand and buy from you, let alone refer to you. But the fourth C is connectivity, and the connectivity refers to the quality and the quantity of your connections. So when you perceive someone to be well connected, right, in a room, in a company, in a community, it's human nature to want to rub shoulders with them. Like it's human nature to gravitate towards someone who's competent, to gravitate towards someone who's credible, to gravitate towards someone who's easy to communicate with as a messenger and their messaging, right? So these are the 4 Cs in a nutshell. And I think that you need to tick not one of these boxes, you need to tick all four of these boxes. Trust isn't enough because it only covers two. Communication isn't enough because it only covers one. And the quality and quantity of your connections isn't enough because it only covers one. So you got to really bring these four together in order for people to perceive you as the go-to expert in your field.
Well, we met the other day. I was, I guess, surprised by the interpretation of competence and credibility and the breakup of those two, because I'd always linked competence and credibility as being the same thing. So I think you're saying that, credibility is the humanness of the person, the human ability to relate with other humans, which is very interesting because I kind of thought credibility was more of the professional expertise, which you call competence. So tell us a little bit more about how you break those two down.
Okay, first, let me just tell you that there's various models out there, right? Like if you look at the Stephen Covey model, what he believes is that trust is made up of credibility and competence. While that may be the case, I think you could argue that they're separate and distinct, competence and credibility. There's other models like the trust equation that doesn't mention competence necessarily or directly. It's more about reliability. It's more about, credibility. It's more about intimacy, and it's more about whether you focus on self or other, right? So even there, let's say we threw in, because I don't know the model in its entirety, to be completely honest with you, but let's say credibility is still competence is still in there. So you could argue that they're together, but let me share with you how I see them as separate and distinct and why they're important. If you go to a foreign country, I think I shared this example with you. With in a foreign country, right? And there's a taxi driver. You look at the car, and you think, hey, the car's in great shape, whatever. You're not questioning the competence of the individual. You're not saying, hey, I want to see the driving school record. I want to see how many hours this guy's been on the road, right? What you're really asking, so you give them the competence there, all right? If it was a teenager that showed up, maybe you wouldn't. But let's just say we give this person competence. Hey, they know how to drive a car. You don't really question that. But really, what you're asking at times in foreign countries is, will this individual take me directly to the hotel, right? Are they going to take the scenic route or take me directly to the destination? Are they going to rack up the bill? That's a credibility thing. That's a human thing. We're asking, can I trust him as a human being to take me where I want to go? Does he have, right? Does he have my best interest at heart? Is he going to take me for ransom if you want to look at the extreme of this, right? Which I'm not assuming that happens in every foreign country, but I'm just saying that you may consider that. So this is how I believe we benefit by separating them, because then you can look at an individual and say, look, I know this guy can deliver on results. He can come in and he's going to paint my house. I get that. I know he's competent. He can do a great job. He's not going to paint the floors of the ceiling, right? He's going to paint my walls. But now the question is, do I trust him to follow through on his word in terms of, is he going to show up on time? Is he going to then all of a sudden surprise me with some additional bill or something? That's more of a credibility issue. And I think it's important to separate them so that we can know what boxes we need to tick in our minds when it comes to assessing others. And it's important that we signal the C's separately, sometimes together, but all separately, so that we know what we need to work on and double down on.
Yeah, then that makes sense. Now, a lot of the listeners and viewers of Muhami Matters are in professional services. We've got a lot of lawyers and doctors, accountants, other types of professionals. So just thinking about the application of the 4Cs to the legal profession. So can you walk us through that a little bit? So we've got competence and credibility. How do they apply to a lawyer, in your view?
Right. Well, yeah. So I'm definitely not an expert in any of these fields, but I'll just tell you that the overarching theme is the same, right? Is that when someone steps into a law firm, they are asking these questions about the individual they're dealing with, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a paralegal, or right, or a consultant of sorts, but or business development. They're asking, is this person competent? I'm coming in with a problem, and I believe competence is you being capable of delivering results, you being effective at solving people's problems, answering people's questions. So they're looking at it through that lens. And then they're also asking, when someone says, okay, this is a go-to person, I believe that competence gets your foot in the door, but credibility keeps you in the room, right? So they believe, yes, you're competent, you're the go-to person, but now they're asking, okay, so what's your pricing structure? Is it fair? Do you really care about me? When I'm talking, are you even listening, right? Are you focused on me, or do you have a self, or you're more self-oriented where you're focused on the bottom line? Are you putting me, the person, before profits, or are you putting the profits before me, the person? This kind of stuff.
Got it.
That's what they're
Makes
gauging.
sense.
That's what they're gauging. Yeah.
Okay, so that covers off the first two. Then clarity, I guess. I'm guessing how this would apply, but putting yourself in as a potential client, You're an Amazon bestseller, so you have obviously had to do deals, sign contracts, and probably dealt with lawyers. Clarity, what would you be looking for on that one?
Yeah, I've dealt with a lot of lawyers, just so you know. There's 2 lawyers on my team with 80 years combined experience with the 4Cs. And I'll tell you that clarity comes down to two things, right? It's, do people understand your message, right? And then so are they resonating with the message? Does it make sense? Do they understand it? And it's oftentimes not the words we use, because you could take these 15 words and you can look at them on paper and they make perfect sense and the message is clear. But it's also it also has to do with the messenger. How is the message delivered? What's your pace? If you're talking too quickly to someone who doesn't have English as their first language, doesn't have
Hmm.
Arabic as their first language or whatever, or Italian as their first language, and you're communicating to them, it just goes over their head. So it's both the message and the messenger.
Makes sense. I guess in the context of legal advice, you also need to be able to, that lawyer needs to be able to explain the concept to the client in a very, very clear way that the client can understand. Because otherwise
Yes.
you don't have that credibility, that human touch that you mentioned. Because if the client doesn't understand, and are they supposed to trust you and really know that you're giving the right advice and that that's what they're signing off on, I guess.
Right. You're bang on. And can you see that if you do a technical dump, if you dump jargon and highly technical terms, you lose them at hello, right? And at the same time, what people need to understand is I've separated these C's, but they do overlap, right? So if you don't speak in a way that's easy to understand, if you don't simplify the message in a way people can grasp, then they wonder how much you care about them, because they think
Hmm.
this person's not taking the time to really understand where I'm coming from. See that as a lack of credibility as well. So there is an overlap. We believe that every C highlights and blacks out the other C's.
Yeah, I'm thinking that in the context of doctors that I've seen in the past, some really, really good doctors or really good physios, chiropractors maybe, who will tell you exactly what's going on. They give you the detail, but in a way that I could understand it. And I walk away from there being able to explain to somebody else, to the next professional, to my wife or whoever, what's happened, why it's happening, and how long it's going to take me to get better.
Exactly.
So yeah, I really like, I guess, I understand where these first three C's come from. Why do you think so many capable professionals really struggle to communicate clearly enough to be referable, or to communicate, I guess, with their patients or their clients?
Yeah, well, speaking of patients, when I used to speak to patients or stand up at a networking function, what I would typically say in my early days would be, hi, I'm a chiropractor. I introduce myself, blah, blah. And I'd say, what we do is we treat vertebral subluxation complex, so that when we remove those subluxations, we allow the nervous system to flow, and then your body will self-regulate, etc. People don't understand what the hell I'm saying. I literally lost them at, hi, my name is so-and-so, right? So I think the struggle is that we think as communicators that it's about being clear in your head, when it's not about clarity of thought. It's about clarity of messaging. It's not about how clear you are in your head. What matters most is how clear you are in the ears of the listeners.
Mm.
And that's a completely different shift, because when it's clear in your head, you think, hey, done and dusted, I've done my work. I possess clarity. No, you don't. You may possess the ability to be clear in your mind. The potential is there, but unless you signal clarity, it's not landing for people.
Yeah, so I guess I understand that as if you've got it clear in your head, you've done the diagnosis as a doctor, as a lawyer, or whatever. You've diagnosed what the challenge is, the legal issue or the medical issue. But the next step is to then be able to communicate that very clearly to whoever you're dealing with. And that is what you're saying is the only thing that completes the puzzle, or gets you three-quarters of the way, because you obviously need connectivity as well. Would
True.
that be
And keep
about
in
right? Is that
mind,
the right hypothesis?
yeah. No, no, it's very well put. And I'll just tell you that people make assumptions about you when you lack clarity. So if you lack clarity, they question your competence. As Einstein said, I believe it was attributed to Einstein, that if you can't explain something simply, you simply don't understand it. So they may be looking into your or questioning your competence. Other people may be looking at lack of clarity as, you know, a credibility issue, that if you don't care enough to explain it in a way that I can understand. I know as a student, I I thought that. Like, why is the professor making it so complex? Like, doesn't he want me to understand? Isn't the idea for me to get it? Or is it just for him to sound smart?
Or
Or
maybe
for
just
her to
tick a
sound
box.
smart?
He wants to get through the lesson, doesn't he? He wants to, yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it's very interesting. So that makes me think, as you were saying that there, about the age of AI to a degree. And we're digressing it slightly, but I do remember a senior partner standing up at an event I was at about a year ago, saying that the tradie lawyers that are coming through are using AI for a lot of the junior level work, the discovery work, and all that sort of stuff. Result of that is that they're not actually understanding the answer to the problem. They're getting the answer, but they're not understanding why they're getting to that answer, or making the mistakes that are required to learn why things are right or wrong. So I can definitely see your point you were talking about on the clarity side, and the professor. You need to understand. You need to be able to repeat back what the answer is in order to understand it. That makes sense.
Yeah, and Chris, just real quick, touching on the point
Hmm.
of AI, I won't go too deep here. I just want to mention that most business professionals, whether like, your audience are consultants and lawyers and founders, etc., they think that the secret is to go wider with tech, right? They going wider with competence, or maybe tech is helping you with clarity. But the idea is that when it comes to, running a business and connecting with it's human beings. It's about deepening your business relationship mastery,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
unless AI is aiding with that, you may actually find that you're missing the mark. You may be
100%.
doubling down on
100%.
something that isn't what you actually need, because most businesses, I can tell you from a survey that was done with Dr. Ivan, to Dr. Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, to 4,900, I want to say 18, if I get the stat right. We wrote about this in the book that we co-authored. And what we're saying is those individuals, when they were asked where they get the majority of their business, guess what? Most of it comes from networking and referrals. And
Wow.
so it's about connecting with human beings. Your bot isn't going to do all the work for you. Guarantee you that.
So that brings us to the fourth C then, of connectivity, which may surprise some people. Why does being so well connected affect how others perceive your value?
Yeah. So if you think about it from a Neanderthal, like let's go way back in the beginning of time, right? It's essential to your survival to connect with individuals who are well connected, because if you see this other Neanderthal very well connected to where to get the tools, where to make the tools, where to get the food, what groups are great for hunting with, etc., you want to rub shoulders with that person, right? Because you being connected to him means you're connected to everyone else that he's connected to potentially. And that holds true today. And it's human nature today to want to rub shoulders with individuals who are well connected, because the more connections you have and the higher quality of those connections, the more answers you have to your questions, the more solutions you have to your problems. So really, it's human nature to survive and to thrive by connecting with individuals who have a high quality
Hmm.
and a high quantity network. If you see someone who has millions of followers, you naturally would gravitate to that person, because there's assumptions you make about that person, that if they're so well connected, they're probably connected with someone I want to connect with. If they're so well connected, maybe they're competent at something that I would need to know about, right? If they're so well connected, etc. You make assumptions about that individual, and you have probably an increased ambition to want to get to know them, compared to, just to give some contrast to your listeners, compared to the person standing in the corner in the room and not connecting with anybody. You perceive that person, they're not working the room. They probably aren't that important. Yes, there could be other things, like maybe they're going through a tough time right now, or etc. But you're assuming that they're not very well connected. And when people assume that you're not well connected in the community, their ambition to connect with you is probably low compared to someone who is.
Oh, that makes sense. For that example you gave about the influence, the person on TikTok or Instagram or whatever with millions of followers, how do they have that credibility bit? Do they have that second C? What
Not
do you need to
necessarily,
get
no.
that second C? Yeah.
Here's what I think, right? Think of it as distance. Like, connectivity is probably, in terms of when you use your senses, right? It's probably the first thing you can pick up. Because somebody steps into a room, they're 60 feet away from you, right? As soon as they step into the room, you're probably looking at how people gravitate to them. Are people lighten up when they see them? right? Are people hugging them? Are they high-fiving them? Are they fist pumping them? Are they shaking hands? What's the connection like? And if you notice this person is, attracting a crowd, right? You start asking questions about what does this person do? Are they good at it? That's competence. What's this person like? Are they warm? Are they friendly? That's credibility, right? And, how does this, you don't have no idea how they communicate, but it just, connectivity wants you to come, increases the likelihood of you wanting to come closer to that individual. And when you do come closer, then you might be asking, you might have doubt about the other C's, or it may, highlight those C's in some way that, reinforces some of your, intuition.
So how then do these four factors work together to create what you call the confidence point? So that I guess it doesn't go backwards from achieving the four C's and then someone saying, oh, no, I don't believe he's competent, or I don't believe he's credible.
Right. So what we speak about in the four C's world is when the four C's come together. In other words, when you possess them and when you signal them effectively. So in other words, you own them and people see that you own them, right? You will have confidence in yourself because you own them, and others will have confidence in you because you signal them, right? So in other words, people will have, I call that the go-to expert in the field, or winning over people's confidence when they all converge.
Yeah, that's a confidence point, and that's there to stay, I'm guessing. Once you've achieved that confidence point, it's very hard to have it removed, for people to lose that.
Not necessarily, Chris, because you got to be
Okay.
careful here. If all of a sudden you stop caring, you
Uh-huh.
stop playing fair, right? Then credibility starts to drop. If all of a sudden you stop taking the time to explain in a simple way what you do, what you're about, what your solutions are, then it starts getting complex for people and clarity starts to drop. You start to lose clarity in the eyes of others. And same with competence. If you start over-promising and under-delivering, then your competence is in question. So they're not fixed. They're not fixed. They may be more, you may have such a great reputation. It may take some time for them to fall. But if you see with, Paul, I don't want to go into politics, but you can see many politicians in an instant can lose credibility in the eyes of others.
Very true. Very true. That's got me thinking. Okay, now looking at some of the practical applications. So for someone running a law firm, a consultancy, a specialist practice, what are some of the practical signs that one of their C's is underdeveloped?
Yeah. So I want to just share two kinds of awarenesses. Okay. There's self-awareness, and self-awareness says, you know what? I know that I lack clarity,
Mm.
right? I know maybe that, remember we talked about clarity being the message and the messenger. Maybe I know I don't have the confidence to get on stage and speak, right? So that's self-awareness is enough to know whether you possess the four C's.
Okay.
Okay. Relational awareness is really about where you stand in the eyes of others. So this is when a lawyer in a law firm might say, you know what, I know I lack clarity. I know maybe credibility is something I struggle with because I continually break my word. And there's a lot to learn about what the four C's are before you can figure out what you're doing right and wrong. But then the relational awareness bit is more about feedback. Like, I'm getting feedback from people. Why didn't that person choose to sign on the dotted line after I explained what I did for like an hour? So now you start wondering, maybe I'm not signaling it. Why is, why does this individual, why is this individual not referring business to me? I have a relationship with them. I referred business to them. Right. So that's why we go, I don't know if you're going to go into this later, but we do assessments with the four C's where you can anonymously see where you stand in the eyes of others, because they can pick up your blind spots, or what we call your deficient C or deficiencies, if you're struggling with more than one.
Yeah, that's got me thinking, because I guess the second time you've kind of referred to this. That I've been in networks, for example. You mentioned BNI before, but there's many other networks out there. And I've found people who know, like, and trust me, or who I know, like, and trust. But we struggle to refer work to each other. We struggle to, I like the guy or the girl, but I really struggle to send work their way. Probably. Now I'm thinking because one of those C's is lacking. I don't understand their competence, I guess, or I don't fully understand what they do because probably they haven't communicated that to me in a clear enough way. So you're right. You've said that referrals don't simply flow from people who know, like, and trust us. What tends to drive referrals in the real world, do you think?
Excuse me, one more distinction, Chris, in that people think that there's also the law of reciprocity that is at play here. We believe,
Yes.
like you said, this person's giving me business, I should give them back, but you just can't. Oftentimes, because you feel like your hands are tied. You don't have, like you said, enough information. One of the C's is lacking. So I can't risk my reputation and give back, even though the intention to give back, the intention to help is there. And I'm saying that because it's important that your listeners understand that if they're not getting business back from individuals they've given business to, right? Then they need to figure out very quickly why that's the case, what C is lacking. And I believe that the only thing worse than not getting referrals is not knowing why.
Yeah. Yes.
So just to circle back to the 4 C's, I think the reason why, what really drives referral generation are the 4 C's, right? Competence. I'm just going to put them in this order, but it's not necessarily this order. Just one way to think about it. Competence gets your foot in the door.
Yes.
Credibility keeps you in the room. Clarity keeps the conversation flowing. And connectivity expands the relationship. Right? So if you're not able to get your foot in the door, if you're not able to stay in the room, if you're not able to keep the conversation going, if you're not able to expand the relationship beyond just a two, then one or more of the C's is deficient.
Yeah, I guess you then can't do the 5th C of converting. There you go.
Yeah,
Right. It's
that's a
really
great one. I
interesting.
mean, yeah, when you do possess the 4 C's, people have confidence in you, and you're more likely going to convert.
Okay, so then
And
how can
one more
professionals...
thing,
Yeah, go
Chris.
ahead, sorry.
Yeah, one more thing, and one more thing. Convert consistently. If you want to just have a salad
Another
of
C.
C's here.
Okay, yeah, that is right. We all would convert consistently. That is what keeps business going. Back to the other question, I guess. So you need to have more than know, like, and trust. What tends to really drive referrals in the real world?
Yeah, no, it really is the 4 C's. That's what I mean.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything else. I mean, there could be other factors. Like, I'll give you an example. In politics, I spoke to somebody at the world's largest debut media event in Abu Dhabi, okay? And they had some big names there. I spoke to someone in politics. He's from the US. And he said to me, "Odie, you're missing a C." And I said, "Is that right?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Confidence." And I said, "Well, we actually have confidence in our model in two ways. When you're competent, you're confident, right? But also when the 4 C's converge, you reach what we call the confidence point. You possess confidence and others have confidence in you." And I did that whole jazz. I explained that whole thing to him. And he said, "No, that's not what I mean." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "What I'm saying is in politics, you need confidence regardless of competence." He's saying you just got to be
Right.
confident. It doesn't matter if you're competent. And I said, "Well, my friend, that's not what I want to promote. That's for sure. I don't want false competence or perceived competence. I want actual competence in myself, in my wheelhouse. But also, I'm hoping that other people have confidence in that field before we vote for them, before we, want to follow them as leaders."
Yeah, because you don't have the credibility without what you just talked about, right? You need that credibility to complete the puzzle.
You need credibility, and yeah, you need competence. You got to be competent at what you're doing at your job. It's not just about false competence by just showcasing confidence by, flexing your muscles, but you don't really have you have no punch in those muscles.
So then, just in practical terms, how can professionals become more referable without sounding overly polished or sales driven? It doesn't come naturally. How can you, you know, find which, say your deficiency is I guess the communication bit or the clarity bit. How can you become more referable without sounding very polished or sales driven and scripted?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. I mean, this takes me back to Harvard professor Ellen Langer, and she speaks about mindfulness, right? And what's really interesting is that you don't necessarily have to. You can communicate the same way. You can use the same words every time. generally, like you go into a networking function saying, okay, I know my go-to lines, right? Because people are going to ask you certain things. How'd you get into your field? How long you been in your field, etc. You have your lines, right? And so what she speaks about is being mindful of how you can be a little bit unique, a little bit different each time. And that simple act of trying to be different in your communication is enough for people to actually gravitate to your message. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what she's saying here, but that's her approach, is that just try to share it in a little bit with a twist, a little bit every single time. And then you'll be more authentic because you're focused on yourself, which is the scripted part, what's worked in the past, but you're also catering to the individual. You're adapting it to the individual in front of you, because that individual might be in education, they might be in legal, they might be in work for government. So if you just think about how can I adjust my message just a bit to make it more relevant to them, you come across as being more authentic. In fact, Ellen Langer will say you come across as being more charismatic.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's quite challenging for someone who's not naturally charismatic. So that is really useful. You've obviously worked with so many different people from so many different walks of life over the years that you've been talking about the 4Cs. Can you share a practical example or two of how using the 4Cs has helped shift an outcome for a client, a team, or an organization?
Yeah, I'll start with the big organizations because it's quite simple. There was one tech company that had, get this, 22% of their staff said that they considered quitting and leaving the company in the last 12 months,
Wow.
almost a quarter. And
Wow.
after we ran the program, 100% stayed on for, I want to say, 30 months, or I think it was 2 years, 2+ years. So that's a simple one to share. There's examples. The examples I love the most are the individual transformations, right? Companies is great and they're all fun, but it's hard to relate. But I'll share with you an individual who attended a 4Cs. So we roll the 4Cs out in 3 steps: DNA. And the discovery talk, the D, was about what the 4Cs are and why they're relevant. Then we run N for the DNA. N is navigate the 4Cs through assessments, where we run anonymous peer-to-peer assessments. And you can see where you stand in the eyes of your peers. You can see the perception gap between how you see yourself and how others see you, right? Then we go into A, which is applying the techniques to develop your Cs, right? One or more of the Cs, and whether that's books or coaching or training. So one individual was interesting because we asked them beforehand what they expect the lowest C to be. She expected her lowest C to be clarity.
Mm.
So clarity was her deficiency, and she expected her competence to be her abundancy, the C that
Yeah.
she's seen, in high supply in the eyes of her peers. And what happened when she got the results, it was the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, they rated her low on competence and high on clarity. And for this individual, it changed a lot. It changed a lot for her, because now when she communicates, she makes sure she's sprinkling in evidence for competence. She was clear enough. And she shared her go-to ways of explaining what she does. That was instruction. And now she said to me, it changed the way she pitches. It changed the way she communicates. Because look, you can walk around you could be in business for 20, 30, 40 years and do the same thing over and over again and literally be blind to where you stand in the eyes of others. And that's why I believe
Yeah.
our anonymous peer-to-peer assessment tools, everything, it is, I shouldn't say everything, but is a lot, because it helps you see what you can't, right? It helps you see the blind spot over here that you just can't see behind you, right? And once you bring that into your awareness, then you know what to work on. And I should mention what not to work on so much, because if your peers rated you high on competence, right, you don't need to show off anymore. You don't have to
Yeah.
explain and over explain. If they rated you low on clarity of communication, then you got to double down on that. So the 4Cs helps you understand what to work on, but also what maybe just to maintain and not, overreach with anymore.
So what do these assessments look like? Are they quite blatant 10 questions, or are they a lot longer, more subtle, I guess, to get these results?
Okay, well, first, thank you for asking. First, they're anonymous, okay,
Mhm.
and completely confidential. So only you see your results. You first assess yourself, so you know where you stand in your own eyes, and then you get assessed by your peers. So you would see on the app all the names of your peers. You click on a person's name and you would assess them on each of the C's. It takes seconds to assess each person because it's a heuristic. It's based on intuition. We don't want you to go into analysis paralysis. We just want your, you might say, I don't want to say gut response, although some people say that, intuitive response. How do I feel about this individual? It comes to you in seconds. And then at the end, you get a scorecard, and the scorecard will tell you where you stand in your own eyes. Example, you rated yourself 8 on all 4 C's, right? Where you stand in the eyes of your peers gave you 8 on 3 of the C's, but they gave you 3 on clarity of communication. And then we have a variance report, a detailed report that tells you the degree to which your self-perception differs from your peer perception. What we call, it's a variance summary, and it tells you that, hey, this is the greatest gap. Your gap is in clarity. Your peers don't perceive you to be as clear as you rated yourself, or maybe they perceive you to be to be a great communicator, and you're playing what we call playing small, right? So, and then what you get is a group average. Let me explain this, because I've already spoken about on an individual level, you know what your deficiency is and you know what your abundancy is, right? You know the C you need to celebrate and stop showing off with if it's competence, and you know what you need to double down on. But as a group, it also speaks volumes to the collective. Because if a group scored low collectively, right, on credibility, we know this group has trust issues. Right? If the group scored low on clarity, we know this group has communication issues. So you can find out what the deficiencies and abundancies are at the individual and group level. And if you have multiple teams, you can also see where are your individuals, shining with the 4 C's. And if you relate that to KPIs and ROI, then you can figure out exactly, which C in this organization, it would make the greatest difference.
So you've got the analytics, you've got the results. What do you then do about it? Both as an individual, what do you do about it, but also as a company, I guess.
Absolutely. So the DNA is the way we roll it out, right? So D is for discover the 4 C's. That's a talk and educational. So they understand what the 4 C's are, what the research, what research is out there to support that, and why it's relevant to their field. N is navigate the 4 C's through assessments. And as you said, you'll get the individual and group results. The A is apply the 4 C's coaching, developmental frameworks, which are either getting the audiobooks, getting the Kindle books, getting the paperback books. If individuals learn by reading, so that's how an individual would shift their score. One-to-one coaching, because some people learn best that way, or group training for individuals who learn best in groups, and for shifting group scores. So that's what we do. We go in there and we apply the developmental techniques and frameworks. And then what we do is we go back and we do what we call a second season for the 4 C's, right? So you might have season 1, you go in and you've got these results. You go in season 2, do another little quick refresher on what the D is, especially if there's new people in the group. You run another assessment, and then you compare results. So now you can see as an individual, I'm trending upwards with clarity. You can see as a group, we're trending upwards with credibility. We've addressed the personal trust issues, etc. And then you can track how an individual and a group are performing and trending over time, and how that relates to whatever things you want to shift in that company, whether it's ROI or whether it's retention, etc.
Okay, so there are some practical outcomes that you and your team can help with.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it's just academic. We're just philosophizing as to
Yeah.
what it takes to get business. We want to actually move the needle in the area that's most important for the
So for
organization.
listeners out there today who might feel listening to this, they're strong in 1 or 2 C's, but weaker in others, where should they start?
Yeah, great question. So again, I always believe that you go to the method through which you learn best. If individuals learn best through reading, then I would recommend picking up the paperback or the Kindle books. If someone learns best through audio, then pick up the audiobooks. Someone learns best through coaching, then reach out and someone from the team can help you on my side. If it's the an individual who learns best through training, then we got to organize some sort of training for them or their company.
So organizations are bringing to you all different kinds of challenges around retention, performance, growth. I think you're spreading it around the world as well, aren't you?
Yes. So we get approached by by main verticals, right? So it's government employees or government bodies that want to, shift engagement, right? Corporations that want to make a difference in ROI, KPI. We have entrepreneurs and networking individuals who want to open more doors, close more deals, maximize their return on investment, right? In their networking return on investment. And then, of course, we have academics. We have universities and university students that are interested in, for the students, what tools they need to hit the ground running after graduating. So universities, in terms of potentially this being a course, I'm in discussions with several that are put on hold just because of what's going on in my part of the world, but in the Emirates. And yeah, and so what we also are doing is, I believe this is so transformative, right? Both at the individual, group, community, country level, that we've turned the business into a licensing model where we individuals can become, national licensee holders, where they basically they have the national rights to run the 4Cs in their country. We have individuals who can take it more as at a regional level, like a city level, if you will, and they can build training teams. And then we are certifying individuals to become 4Cs practitioners, so they can go out there and run the DNA, the discover, navigate, and apply to the various verticals.
I like that there are many entry points. So for someone like me who's a solopreneur or has a small company, I can do the work online. I can do it with you in person. But there's something that's at my level. But also, yeah, if you are part of a big university, you want to do it from a more academic side, then that's available as well, and you can do it all over the world. So, yeah, I think that is quite impressive, and the fact that it's tailored to individuals and businesses is fantastic. I guess you mentioned the troubles that are going on in that part of the world, the Middle East at the moment. For businesses out there who are listening today, and things have slowed down a bit, things are a bit uncertain. Why do you think it's still the time right now to keep investing in relationships and visibility?
Stephen Covey spoke about sharpening the saw, if you
Hmm.
remember. Like he's speaking more about, an individual who keeps trying to cut down a tree, but the saw is dull, take a break and sharpen it. That makes sense. But using that kind of same metaphor, I'd like people to understand that when there's not trees to cut because business is on pause or slowed down to some degree, this is where you can sharpen skills, right? This is when you want to go into, personal development, professional development, right? And it's also an opportunity to continue to network and build relationships, because when that window opens again, right? When the window swings or the door swings wide open again, we want to be able to hit the ground running. We don't want to be wasting time tying our shoes, right? Lacing them up and etc. We want to be able to take those relationships we've been investing in during this period and the skills that we've invested in during this period, right? And not stop, because you would have moved that relationship further along and maybe help people see where you stand when it comes to the 4Cs, as opposed to starting fresh and starting new. Because as you know, in sales, they talk about the 8 to 12 touch points. I don't know if that's necessarily true. And if they are true, it probably takes 8 to 12 touch points for people to see that you possess the 4Cs. Right. So you might as well get that process started now. I wouldn't stop and just wait for, things to quote normalize. I just keep business as usual, keep living. I always say that peace or war, there's always much to be grateful for. And so don't stop. Just keep, you know, pursuing the opportunities that you're blessed to have.
Yeah, certainly some of the conversations I've had this week with other business owners are that they are grabbing those opportunities to work on the business rather than in the business necessarily. They're often so delivering for clients who don't have time to implement ideas that have been on their to-do list for a year or two. They're getting the chance to do that now. So that's definitely what I'm telling people as well, is basically focus. Keep investing. You may have to reduce your spend, but keep investing in what you're doing, but just invest on the focus bits that are really going to give you some ROI and that you couldn't otherwise do. Because it just makes sense,
100%.
doesn't it?
Great
And because
advice.
you'll be the one who's running when everybody else is walking, and things, back
Bingo.
to normal and running all guns blazing. So
Right.
really grateful for your time today, Dr. Oudi.
Thanks, Chris.
What's one big takeaway that you'd most like our listeners to take from this conversation, apply, I guess, immediately in their professional world?
Yeah, maybe it's just the realization that the only thing worse than not getting business or getting results is not knowing why. And on the reverse, maybe the only thing better than getting business and getting results is knowing with precision why things are working.
Brilliant. I love it. Nice and succinct. So people want to find you. You're known as Dr. Oudi. You don't even talk about the Abouchacra bit. So we'll go with Dr. Oudi, O-U-D-I. How can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, whatever platform, wherever they live, I'm pretty much on all of them. It's my handles. I'm sure you're going to share with the group, but they vary. But it's mostly at inspired Dr. Oudi. And if they want to know more about the 4 C's, it's real simple. It's relationshipmastery.biz.
Relationshipmastery.biz. All right. Well, a massive thank you to you for joining us today, Dr. Oudi.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, for me, my takeaway was very similar to what you just said. So growth doesn't come from standing still, and you need to work on yourself. And I think it's easy to do. Whatever those 4 C's don't exist for you, you need to find that out and then work on it. So work on yourself at these uncertain times is definitely the best way.
100%. Well said.
So for our listeners,
Chris.
thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Oudi. Yes, like I said, even in uncertain times, professionals must continue to invest in relationships. Relationships are absolutely vital. You've got to signal your value and stay connected with your business partners and the people who can collaborate with you. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with your network. For more insights and support, visit muhami.ae or connect with me at CJA Consulting. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered. Thank you for joining us on Muhami Matters. If you found today's episode valuable, subscribe and connect with me to stay updated. Join me again soon as we continue to bring you credible insights, practical strategies, and trusted advice to empower your professional journey. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered.